Pineview hasn't changed in decades. This small town in the foothills, with a population of just over 5,000, is frozen in time, like a fly in amber. The main street with its cracked asphalt, faded shop signs, an old church with a bell tower towering over the one-story houses looked exactly the same as it did 15 years ago. Documentary investigation, Silent Revenge in Pineview, voiceover. When a criminal returns to society, he brings with him not only his past, but sometimes a deadly secret. The story of Ray and Lauren Clark is not just a chronicle of a crime, but a tragedy of betrayal in its most intimate form. The camera slowly moves down Pineview's main street, lingering on the sign for Sharon's Cafe, a small, cozy establishment where almost all the locals gather. Behind the counter is a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a friendly smile. This is Sharon Woods, 42, the cafe's owner and Lauren Clark's best friend. Lauren waited 15 years for him, Sharon says, stirring her coffee. Every month she went to visit him. Every week she wrote him a letter. She never missed a single visit. Many people told her, give him up, start your life over. But she always replied, I made a promise. In sickness and in health, remember? April 12th, 2024. Ray Clark, 48, walks out of the gates of Lakeview Maximum Security Prison. Surveillance cameras capture his first steps of freedom, a tall man with graying temples, with the posture of someone accustomed to being on guard. In his hands is a small bag containing all his possessions accumulated over 15 years. He is met by Lauren, a 45-year-old woman with premature wrinkles around her eyes, but still retaining the beauty that once captivated Ray. It was the day I had been waiting for 15 years, Lauren said in an interview recorded a few months before the tragedy. I had imagined it a million times, how we would hug, how we would drive home, how we would start all over again. Footage of their reunion shows them embracing, Lauren in tears, Ray smiling awkwardly. Even then, something seemed wrong about their reunion. Their movements were too stiff, their words too few. Archival footage of their wedding, which took place 2 years before Ray's arrest. Young, happy, making plans for the future. Ray worked as a mechanic at the only auto repair shop in town, and Lauren was just starting her career as a nurse at the city clinic. They were the golden couple of Pineview, recalls Dr. Michael Foster, 50, chief physician at the city clinic. Ray was a local football star in high school. Lauren was a beauty from a good family. No one could have imagined that it would turn out the way it did. Archival footage from the 2009 courtroom. Ray in handcuffs, accused of armed robbery at a gas station on the outskirts of a neighboring town, $20,000 and a seriously injured employee, 15 years in prison. He always swore he didn't shoot, says Lauren, nervously fingering a napkin, that the gun went off accidentally during the struggle. I believed him. I always believed him. Their return to Pineview was quiet. No welcome signs, no parties. The house Lauren had kept by paying the mortgage all these years looked almost the same as it did on the day Ray was arrested. She hadn't changed anything on purpose, so he would feel at home. We hardly spoke on the first night, Lauren recalls. I showed him around the house as if he were a guest. Then we went to sleep in separate rooms. I thought he needed time. We both needed time. The day after he returned, Ray went to a clinic in the neighboring town of Milford, 20 miles from Pineview. Surveillance footage shows him entering the building, spending nearly an hour inside, and leaving with a small paper bag. He said he needed to get a routine checkup after his release, Lauren says, and that he didn't want to go to Pineview because everyone would stare and whisper. I understood him. What Lauren didn't know at the time was that this wasn't Ray's first visit to the doctor. A month before his release, during a preliminary work release from prison, he had already visited the same clinic. Prisoners' medical records are confidential, explains the former warden of Lakeview Prison. We are not allowed to disclose diagnoses even to family members without the prisoner's consent. That's the law. Ray spent the first few weeks after his return trying to rebuild his life. Lauren was still working at the clinic. An old friend helped Ray by hiring him as a mechanic at his garage on the outskirts of town. Ray had changed, says Jim Donovan, the garage owner and Ray's school friend. He became quiet and withdrawn. Prison changes people, I understand that. But there was something else. He was taking pills a lot, and when I asked him about it, he just laughed it off. By the end of his first month of freedom, Ray and Lauren had begun to rebuild their marriage. On the surface, everything seemed normal. They had dinner together, occasionally went out to Sharon's cafe, and even made plans for the future. Ray talked about wanting to save money and leave Pineview to start over somewhere new, where no one knew them. I noticed the change in Lauren almost immediately, recalls Sharon Woods. She had always been so bright, even during the hardest years of waiting. But after Ray came back, she seemed to fade away. I chalked it up to adjustment, settling in. 15 years is no joke. What no one knew at the time was that there had been a local outbreak of HIV among inmates at Lakeview Prison in 2018 to 2019. Official reports mention 9 confirmed cases. Unofficial sources say the number is much higher. HIV is transmitted in prisons mainly through the use of unsterilized needles for tattoos or injection drugs, as well as through unprotected sex, comments an epidemiologist who wished to remain anonymous. Unfortunately, despite all precautions, it is impossible to completely eliminate the risk. Ray did not share the details of his prison life with Lauren. He said he wanted to forget about it, she recalls, that 15 years were a black hole he managed to climb out of, and he didn't want to remember what was inside. By the end of the second month after Ray's return, Lauren began to notice the first symptoms: unexplained fatigue, periodic fever, night sweats. As a nurse, she attributed it to stress and emotional strain. It never occurred to her that the cause could be much more serious. I suggested she get tested, Dr. Foster says, just to rule it out, as a routine check. She refused. She said she had too much on her plate with Ray's return. Meanwhile, Ray himself continued to visit a clinic in a neighboring town on a regular basis. Surveillance camera footage shows him visiting every 2 weeks. I asked him why he was going there, Lauren recalls. He said it was mandatory rehabilitation after prison, that he had been prescribed vitamins and sedatives. I believed him. Why shouldn't I have believed him? It's the end of May 2024. 3 months have passed since Ray's return. Through the window of Sharon's cafe, 2 women can be seen sitting at a table in the corner, Lauren Clark and Sharon Woods. "You've lost weight," says Sharon, looking closely at her friend. "And you look exhausted. Are you okay?" Lauren is pale, with dark circles under her eyes, too thin for her height. She mechanically touches her neck, where small, swollen lymph nodes are visible. "Just tired. Work is crazy, home, Ray and I are still getting used to each other." Security camera footage from a city pharmacy shows Lauren buying fever reducers and vitamins. "I started noticing changes in her health," Sharon said in an interview. "She often canceled our meetings, saying she wasn't feeling well." Lauren had always been energetic, but now she was constantly tired and had some strange rashes. "I suggested she see a doctor, but she dismissed me, saying she knew everything herself. She was a nurse after all." At the city clinic where Lauren works, her condition is noticed. Dr. Michael Foster, who has known the Clark family for over 20 years, is particularly attentive. "I was watching her with concern," Dr. Foster admits. "As a doctor, I saw symptoms that alarmed me. As a friend, I didn't want to overstep my bounds. It's a difficult ethical dilemma." One day at work, Lauren loses consciousness during her shift. Her medical records show dehydration, low blood pressure, and anemia. Dr. Foster insists on a full examination. "I told her it could be anything from simple exhaustion to a serious infection," recalls the doctor. She agreed to basic tests but refused to undergo a more thorough diagnosis. She said she was just overworked and not sleeping well. Lauren's tests show abnormalities, low white blood cell count, signs of inflammation. But without a specific HIV test, it is impossible to make a diagnosis. Meanwhile, Ray continues to visit the Milford Clinic. Records show that he is receiving antiretroviral therapy. In an interview with a clinic pharmacist, whose face is hidden, he was always very cautious. He paid for everything in cash. He never wanted any documents sent to his insurance company. Once I asked him if his wife knew about his status. He replied that she wouldn't survive the news. Tension is mounting at the Clarks' home. Neighbors recall increasingly frequent arguments. "The walls are thin," says Martha Jenkins, 67, a neighbor of the Clarks. Sometimes you could hear them arguing. He said she didn't understand him, that she didn't know what he'd been through. She cried and said he'd changed, that he didn't trust her. In June, Ray began insisting that Lauren quit her job at the clinic. He explained that he was concerned for her well-being and that she needed to rest and recharge. In reality, he was concerned that her symptoms would attract too much attention from her colleagues. "I was surprised," Sharon admits. Lauren always loved her job, and then suddenly she agreed to take a long vacation. She said she and Ray needed time to be together. But it seemed to me that she was just avoiding unnecessary questions. Ray's medical records from the prison hospital, obtained later by investigators, contain an entry from December 2018. The patient has been informed of his positive HIV test result. Antiretroviral therapy has been prescribed. The patient refuses psychological counseling. It was clear that he knew about his diagnosis long before his release, comments a correctional medicine specialist. The protocol requires that prisoners be informed of their condition and that treatment be started immediately. The question is why he decided to hide it from his wife. In early July, a characteristic rash appears on Lauren's body, one of the symptoms of advanced HIV infection. She notices it in the bathroom while looking at herself in the mirror. A recording from her phone, made that day and later found by investigators. "I don't understand what's happening to my body. I've had a fever for 3 weeks now. All these rashes, endless fatigue. Michael, Dr. Foster, suggests I get a full checkup, but I refuse. What if... No, it can't be. Ray couldn't. He wouldn't have done that. I'm not going to ask any questions until I know for sure. Tomorrow I'm going to Milford to get some tests done." Ray notices changes in his wife's behavior. She begins to avoid physical intimacy, explaining that she is not feeling well. He becomes irritable and drinks frequently. "I saw him at the bar almost every night," says bartender Tony Wright. "He sat alone, drank a lot. Sometimes he said strange things, that he had ruined the life of the only person who loved him, that he didn't deserve a second chance." In mid-July, Lauren secretly visits a clinic in Milford. CCTV footage shows her entering the building, looking around nervously. 3 days later, she returns to get her results. "That was the moment her world fell apart," says Dr. Carol Hines, who saw Lauren that day. "I told her that her HIV test was positive. She didn't cry or scream. She just asked, 'How long could I have been infected?' When I told her that the virus had been in her system for quite some time, given her symptoms, she understood." That same evening, a serious conflict erupted at the Clark home. Neighbors called the police because of screaming and the sound of breaking dishes. The police report states, "Domestic dispute, no physical violence reported." The parties refused to file a report. She was screaming that he had betrayed her, that he knew and didn't say anything, recalls Officer Jason Turner, who responded to the call. He didn't deny it, he just sat there with his head down. When I asked what it was about, they both fell silent. They said they would work it out themselves. The next day, Lauren shows up at Dr. Foster's office. Medical records show the start of antiretroviral therapy. Michael Foster becomes her confidant. "She was in terrible shape," says the doctor. "Not just physically, but psychologically. Imagine waiting 15 years for someone and then finding out that they knowingly put you at risk of death. It's not just betrayal, I don't even know what to call it." At the same time, Ray begins to show signs of remorse. He visits the clinic several times, trying to talk to Lauren. She refuses. "I saw his attempts to apologize," recalls nurse Janet Wilson, Lauren's colleague. "He brought flowers, waited for her after her shift. But the look in her eyes when she saw him, there was so much pain and hatred in it at the same time. I had never seen Lauren like that before." Sharon Woods becomes Lauren's closest support. Lauren temporarily moves in with her friend, not wanting to stay in the same house with Ray. "She told me everything," Sharon says. "I was shocked. How could you do that to someone who waited for you for 15 years? I suggested she go to the police and report him for intentional infection. She refused. She said she couldn't bear the public shame. The whole town would know. Everyone would be talking about it." By the end of July, Ray takes an unexpected step. He publicly confesses his actions at a local church. Without mentioning the diagnosis directly, He speaks of an unforgivable betrayal and asks Lauren for forgiveness. "It was strange," recalls Pastor Daniel Gray. "He stood before the congregation, many of whom had known him since childhood, and spoke of a sin that could not be atoned for. People were bewildered. Lauren wasn't there." In early August, a new circumstance intervened in the Clarks' lives. Mark Donnelly, Ray's former cellmate, who had been serving time for drug offenses, was released from prison. He came to Pineview, ostensibly to visit an old friend. Their meeting at the bar was tense, an eyewitness recounts. They spoke quietly, but they were clearly arguing. At one point, Ray grabbed the guy by the chest and hissed something in his face. The guy smiled and walked away. What no one knew at the time was that Mark Donnelly was one of the sources of HIV infection at Lakeview Prison. It was through contact with him that Ray became infected. August 2024. Pineview is sweltering in an abnormal heat wave. Thermometers read 95 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade. The asphalt is melting, and residents are hiding in their air-conditioned homes. In this stifling heat, an even more heated conflict is brewing. Lauren Clark's medical records, obtained during the investigation, show that she began antiretroviral therapy on July 22nd. Dr. Foster personally oversees her treatment, although she is now formally a patient at the Milford Clinic. "I broke protocol," Foster admits in an interview. "Technically, I shouldn't have interfered with her treatment once she decided to go to another clinic, but I couldn't leave her alone with this, not after 15 years. The sentence remains unfinished. CCTV footage from Pineview shows Michael Foster staying late in his office, studying the latest HIV treatment protocols. Lauren continues to live with Sharon, refusing to return home to Ray. In the evenings, the friends sit on the porch, Lauren often crying. "She couldn't understand why he did it," Sharon says. "She asked the same question over and over again. If he knew, why didn't he tell me right away? Why did he put us at risk? I didn't know what to say. Some actions are inexcusable." Meanwhile, Ray tries to contact his wife. His cell phone shows dozens of missed calls and messages from Lauren. One of them, sent on July 25th, reads, "Lauren, I know you'll never forgive me, and you shouldn't, but I have to explain. Not over the phone. Meet me, just once. For the sake of the 15 years you waited." She doesn't respond. Neighbors notice Ray spending more and more evenings on the porch of their house, drinking alone. Tensions rise on August 2nd, when Mark Donnelly shows up in Pineview. He rents a room in the only motel in town and starts asking around about the Clarks. "Strange guy," recalls Tim Gardner, the motel manager. "He kept asking about the locals. He was especially interested in Ray Clark and his wife. He said they were old friends, but there was something sinister in his tone." Ray and Mark's meeting at the Last Mile bar on the outskirts of Pineview escalates into a conflict. Bartender Tony Wright overhears part of their conversation. "This new guy, Mark, said something like, 'We're even now, right, Ray?' Clark turned pale and grabbed him by the shirt. They went out to the parking lot. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but when Ray came back, he ordered a double whiskey and drank it in one gulp. His hands were shaking." The next day, Mark Donnelly shows up at Sharon's house. He doesn't know that Lauren is temporarily living there. A surveillance camera at a neighbor's house captures the scene. Mark rings the doorbell. Sharon opens the door. There is a brief exchange. Then she slams the door shut. Mark stands on the porch for a while, then leaves, looking back. "He asked about Lauren," Sharon recalls. "He said he was Ray's friend from prison and wanted to give her important information. He gave me the creeps. I said I didn't know where Lauren was and slammed the door. Then I called her at work to warn her." On August 5th, an event occurs that changes the course of history. Lauren finally agrees to meet with Ray. The meeting takes place on neutral ground, in an empty Sunday school classroom at the church, with the pastor's permission. "I suggested the place to them," Pastor Gray says. "I thought the sacred walls would help them find, if not reconciliation, then at least understanding. I was naive." Church surveillance camera footage shows Lauren and Ray entering the building 10 minutes apart. He arrives first, pacing nervously in the hallway. She enters resolutely, her back straight but her eyes tearful. Only the two of them know what happened behind the closed classroom doors. There is no audio recording. The video camera only captures the entrance and the hallway. Half an hour later, the door bursts open and Lauren runs out. Her face is contorted with anger and pain. Ray follows, trying to catch up with her, but stops when he sees the pastor coming out of his office. That evening, Lauren tells Dr. Foster about what happened for the first time. A recording of their conversation, made according to medical protocol with Lauren's consent. He admitted that he knew about the diagnosis while he was in prison. He knew for 3 years, Michael. 3. He got it from Mark or someone else, it doesn't matter. What matters is that he knew when he came home. He knew and kept quiet. Foster's voice. Did he explain why? He said he was afraid of losing me, that I wouldn't live with him if I found out, that after 15 years apart, he couldn't take that too. He preferred to risk my life rather than tell the truth, and now this Mark is here in Pineview. Mark? The same one? Yes. Ray says he's blackmailing him, threatening to tell everyone how Ray got infected. Some prison conflict that left Ray vulnerable. I don't even want to know the details, but he's demanding money for his silence. And what is Ray going to do? He said he'll take care of him, that he'll protect me from the shame. His words, not mine. What shame? The whole town probably already knows about my diagnosis. You know how things work around here. The recording cuts off. Medical records show that Lauren's blood pressure rose sharply that day, and Dr. Foster insisted on a sedative. While Lauren and Ray try to sort out their conflict, Mark Donnelly continues to cause trouble. He shows up at Sharon's cafe, where he loudly tells patrons stories from his time in prison, hinting at some unsavory facts about Ray. He was nasty, Sharon recalls. He spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear, but vaguely enough that he couldn't be accused of direct slander. I asked him to leave. He laughed in my face and said that soon everyone would know the truth about the golden couple of Pineview. On August 7th, Mark approaches Lauren directly as she leaves the clinic after work. A parking lot camera captures their conversation. Mark is explaining something insistently. Lauren listens with a tense expression, then tries to leave, and he grabs her arm. At that moment, Dr. Foster comes out of the building, quickly approaches them, and says something to Mark. Mark reluctantly lets go of Lauren's hand and walks away, but turns around and makes a gesture as if he is calling someone on his phone, as if to say that the conversation is not over. He said he wanted to help me, Lauren tells the detective in an interview a month later, that he could tell him what really happened in prison, that Ray isn't who he says he is. I didn't want to listen. Michael intervened just in time. That evening, Ray shows up at Sharon's house. He is drunk and demands to see his wife. Sharon refuses and threatens to call the police. The conflict attracts the attention of neighbors. Eventually, Ray leaves, but not before shouting to the whole street, "Tell her Mark is lying! It wasn't like that!" On August 8th, Mark Donnelly unexpectedly schedules a meeting with Dr. Foster. They meet in a park on the outskirts of town. Footage from a surveillance camera at an ATM across from the park shows their conversation. Mark is gesticulating wildly, while Dr. Foster listens with a stony face. At the end of the meeting, Mark hands him a small object that looks like a flash drive. "I can't comment on the content of that conversation," Dr. Foster says during questioning. "I will only say that the information he provided was shocking, and it concerned not only Ray but also Lauren." That same evening, Dr. Foster visits Lauren at Sharon's house. They talk for a long time on the porch. Neighbors notice that the conversation is emotional. Lauren jumps up several times, paces back and forth, and at one point breaks a glass by throwing it on the floor. "He told me the truth," Lauren explains later. "The whole truth that he learned from Mark and verified in the medical records from prison. Ray didn't just know about his diagnosis. He came back to me on purpose. He could have gone anywhere after his release, started a new life, but he came back to me, knowing he was sick." An entry in Lauren's diary dated that day. "I can't believe it. I don't want to believe it. But all the facts add up. He hated me all these years. He blamed me for not hiring a better lawyer, for not fighting hard enough for his acquittal. He spent 15 years planning his revenge, and he waited. God, why?" On August 9th, Lauren takes a day off from the clinic and unexpectedly goes to Lakeview Prison. She meets with the head of the medical department, Dr. Helen Reed. The content of their conversation remains confidential, but as she leaves the building, cameras capture Lauren in tears. On the same day, Ray calls his employer and friend Jim Donovan to say he's taking a few days off for family reasons. Bank statements show that Ray withdraws almost all of his savings from his account, just over $6,000. Mark Donnelly is seen at the Last Mile bar on the evening of August 9th. He loudly boasts that he will soon be loaded and leave this dump. Bartender Tony Wright recalls that Mark was unusually cheerful and generous, leaving a $40 tip for a couple of beers. On August 10th, Lauren returns home. Not to Ray, to her own home, asking her husband to move out temporarily. She spends the entire day packing his belongings into boxes. Sharon helps her. "She was like a robot," Sharon says. She methodically packed his clothes, books, shaving kit. She didn't cry. She said very little. She only said once, 15 years of my life. He stole 15 years and my health from me. What did I do to deserve this? At the same time, Ray meets Mark in a wooded area outside the city. Footage from a gas station camera on the outskirts of Pineview shows two cars, Ray's old Ford and Mark's rented Chevrolet, turning onto a forest road around 6 p.m. What happened in the woods remains unknown. At 8 p.m., Ray returns to the motel where he has been staying since leaving home. The manager notices that his clothes are dirty and his hands are scratched. "I asked if he needed help," Gardner recalls. "He said he just tripped in the dark. He looked very tense." On August 11th, Lauren comes to church for the first time since receiving her diagnosis. She sits alone in the back row. After the service, she approaches Pastor Gray. She asked if God could forgive a man who deliberately hurt someone who loved him, the pastor recounts. "I replied that God's mercy is boundless, but true forgiveness requires sincere repentance." She nodded and left without saying another word. That same day, Dr. Foster received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a flash drive with a video recording. The video showed Ray and Mark in a prison cell, dated 2018. The content of the recording became a key piece of evidence in the subsequent investigation, but was not fully disclosed to the public for ethical reasons. "This recording confirmed our worst fears," Dr. Foster comments. "Ray really was planning revenge for years. His return to Lauren wasn't an attempt to start over. It was revenge." On August 12th, Lauren calls Ray to meet her. They meet at their home. Neighbors hear loud voices, followed by shouting. At some point, there is silence. Martha Jenkins, neighbor, "I heard her screaming, 'Just admit it now. Just once in your life, tell me the truth.' Then his voice, quieter, indistinct. Then hers again, 15 years, Ray. I wasted 15 years on you." And then, silence. A ringing silence. I thought they had finally talked and calmed down. At 7 p.m., Ray leaves the house. The neighbor's video intercom camera captures his face, pale, with a frozen expression of shock. He gets into his car and drives away. At 7:30, Sharon arrives at the Clark's house, as agreed with Lauren earlier. She rings the doorbell, but no one answers. The door is unlocked. Sharon enters the house and finds Lauren in the living room. Sharon immediately calls an ambulance and the police. The medical report states that Lauren Clark is alive, but in critical condition due to multiple drug overdoses. She is rushed to Milford Hospital, which has an intensive care unit. Ray Clark disappears from Pineview at this time. His phone is turned off, and his car is found abandoned in a parking lot at a bus station in a neighboring town. Detective Alex Morgan is assigned to investigate. The initial theory is attempted suicide due to depression caused by her diagnosis, but a suicide note found in the house raises questions. "Forgive me if you can. You don't deserve this. I'm going to die before you anyway because of complications. I don't want you to carry this burden alone. R." Mark Donnelly also disappears from Pineview on the same day. His belongings are left in a motel, the bill unpaid. On August 14th, Lauren regains consciousness in the hospital. Her condition stabilizes. Sharon and Dr. Foster are by her side. The first thing she asked was, "Did he run away?" Sharon recalls, "I didn't know what to say. Ray was really gone. The police were looking for him." The nurses notice that Dr. Foster is spending much more time in Lauren's room than is professionally required. In Sharon's absence, they talk for a long time. What they talk about remains a mystery. On August 15th, there is an unexpected turn of events. A body is found in the woods outside the city where Ray and Mark were last seen together. But it's not Ray. Mark Donnelly is dead, killed by a blow to the head with a heavy object. The autopsy establishes the time of death as between 6 and 8 p.m. on August 10th, exactly when Ray and Mark met in the woods. Detective Morgan immediately issues a warrant for Ray Clark's arrest, now on suspicion of murder. The case takes a completely new turn. It's the end of August. Pineview is buzzing like a disturbed beehive. The Clark story has gone from private tragedy to criminal sensation, attracting the attention of not only the local but also the regional media. Lauren is discharged from the hospital on August 17th, but does not return home. She continues to live with Sharon, refusing contact with the press and limiting her communication with the police to strictly necessary conversations. She was like a burnt-out shell, Sharon recalls. She walked, talked, even smiled sometimes, mechanically like a doll. But her eyes, there was such pain in her eyes that it was frightening. The official police version, Ray Clark deliberately infected his wife with HIV, then, after his crime was discovered, killed blackmailer Mark Donnelly and fled. Detective Alex Morgan, 38, who is leading the case, notices inconsistencies in the evidence gathered. In domestic crimes, everything is usually on the surface, Morgan says. But here, there are too many questions. Why did Ray return to Pineview if he was planning revenge? Why didn't he leave immediately after infecting his wife? Police reports show that a set of empty blister packs from various medications was found during a search of the Clarks' home. A suicide note allegedly left by Ray raises doubts among handwriting experts. The handwriting resembles his, but there are differences. On August 19th, Detective Morgan gains access to a video recording that was anonymously sent to Dr. Foster. The content shocks even the seasoned police officer. The recording shows a prison cell. Ray and Mark are sitting on bunks. The date is March 12, 2018. Mark, smirking. You think she's still waiting for you, your faithful Lauren? Ray, grimly. Don't mention her name. Mark. Come on, how long is this going to last? You've been getting her letters, her packages, her vows of eternal love for 6 years, and she's out there, free, living, breathing, fucking someone else. Ray lunges at Mark and a fight breaks out. The guards pull them apart, but a few minutes later the conversation continues. Mark, wiping blood from his lip. Stop fooling yourself. She's no saint, you know that. Ray, shut up. Mark, okay, let's say she's waiting for you. You get out and what? You go back to her? After everything she did to you? Ray, surprised. What are you talking about? Mark, with a crooked smile. Oh, don't tell me you still believe that the shot was an accident, that she didn't know the gun was loaded. Ray freezes, his face changing from confusion to shock, then to rage. Mark, I see you didn't know. Nobody told you. Sweet Lauren deliberately left the gun loaded. She wanted you to go to jail. Her testimony in court wasn't just a mistake made by a frightened wife. The video cuts off. The next part of the recording is dated 2 months later, May 8th, 2018. Ray, with a changed, harder face. I've thought it all through. When I get out, I'm going back to her. She'll believe everything is the same as before. And then... Mark. Then what? Ray. Then she'll find out what it's like to die slowly when you've been betrayed by the person you trusted most. The last part of the recording is dated December 2018, after an HIV outbreak in prison. Ray sits alone in the infirmary with his test results. His face shows not despair, but a strange determination. This is perfect, he says to himself. Better than I could have planned. On August 20th, a detective visits Lauren at Sharon's house to clarify some details. Mrs. Clark, he asks, did you ever testify against your husband in the 2009 case? Lauren turns pale. Her hands begin to shake. I testified in his defense. I said the shooting was accidental. And initially, before the trial, was your first testimony the same? I was in shock, Lauren says after a pause. I could have said anything. I don't remember exactly. One more question. On the night you were found unconscious, did you really try to kill yourself? Of course, I was desperate. I had just found out that my husband had infected me on purpose. And you took a dose of medication that was guaranteed not to kill you? Lauren freezes, then slowly looks up at the detective. August 21st, an unexpected turn of events. Ray Clark arrives at the Pineview police station at night. He is gaunt, unshaven, and looks exhausted. He demands to speak to Detective Morgan. "I didn't kill Mark," is the first thing he says. "And I didn't try to kill Lauren, but I am guilty of infecting her." During the interrogation, Ray tells his version of events. Yes, he found out about Lauren's betrayal from Mark in prison. Yes, he was furious and planned revenge. He decided to use his diagnosis. "But when I came back and saw her, saw how she had waited for me all these years," Ray says, "something broke. I couldn't do it. I wanted to, but I couldn't." According to him, he planned to use protection, but after the argument, he gave in to his anger and acted recklessly. "I didn't want to admit that I was sick. I was afraid of her reaction. It was cowardice, not malicious intent." "Why did you go into hiding after the incident with Lauren?" "Because I didn't believe she was trying to kill herself," Ray replied. "On August 12th, we had an argument. I finally told her the whole truth. She was furious. Then she suddenly calmed down and suggested we have a drink to a new beginning. I felt something strange, but I drank. Almost immediately, I started to lose consciousness. The last thing I remember is her calm face. She said, 15 years of my life. You have to pay for that." "Are you saying she poisoned you?" "I woke up in a car in the parking lot of a bus station in Milford. In my pocket was a ticket to San Diego and $2,000. My cash. She planned everything." "Are you saying you didn't kill Mark Donnelly?" "Yes, we met. He was blackmailing me, demanding money for a video. I paid him $6,000, everything I had. He promised to leave." "Why did you come back from the woods with scratches and dirty clothes?" "Mark checked the money and we parted ways. I was walking through the woods back to the car and it was dark. I tripped and fell into a ravine. I had to climb out, so my clothes were dirty." Meanwhile, at Sharon's house, Lauren receives an unexpected visitor, Dr. Foster. "I know what really happened," he says, "and I know about the recording Mark gave me." Lauren turns pale. "What are you talking about?" "About the fact that Mark was blackmailing not only Ray, but you too. About the fact that you did give a different statement in 2009. "Shut up!" Lauren screams. "You don't know anything!" "I know enough," Foster replies calmly, "and I want to help." Sharon, who heard the conversation from the kitchen. "Lauren, what is he talking about?" Lauren looks at her friend with pain. "You don't understand. No one will understand. Tell her about how you were afraid of Ray even before he was arrested. About what he was like," Foster says. "He was a different person," Lauren admits through tears. "Not the person everyone saw. At home, he turned into a monster. He controlled my every move, every dollar. I lived in fear." "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Sharon asks, shocked. "Because this is Pineview. Ray was the golden boy, the local star. Who would have believed me? But the robbery, the prison sentence." "It was an accident. Ray didn't mean to shoot him, but he planned the robbery. We needed money. He was in debt. I knew about the plan. I even helped. I checked the cameras at the gas station." "You were an accomplice," Foster states. "Yes, when the robbery happened, I panicked. During the first interrogation, I told them everything. Then I realized I would go to prison, so I changed my testimony. And Ray found out about it in prison from Mark. Mark somehow got copies of my testimony. When I realized that Ray had deliberately infected me, I was desperate. Then Mark showed up, and everything got worse. He blackmailed me too. He threatened to tell everyone that I was an accomplice." "And you... what did you do?" asks Sharon. "I met with Mark. I offered him money, but he wanted more. Then Lauren falls silent. "Dr. Foster, you arranged to meet him in the woods on the same day he was meeting Ray. You knew Ray would be there with the money, and you waited until Mark was alone." Lauren doesn't answer, but her silence speaks volumes. "What happened next?" Sharon asks quietly. "I just wanted to talk," Lauren whispers. "But he laughed. He said that Ray and I deserved each other, that he would bleed us dry for the rest of our lives. I didn't plan it. It just happened." "A rock," Foster says. "You hit him with a rock." "It was lying there. Mark turned away. I don't remember. All I remember is him falling. And then you staged a suicide attempt," Foster continues. "You slipped Ray a sleeping pill, drove him to the bus station, bought him a ticket. Then you came back and took a calculated dose of pills." "How do you know?" asks Lauren. "I'm a doctor. I know how these drugs work. Your dose was calculated perfectly. Enough to put you to sleep, but not enough to kill you. Sharon jumps up. Lauren, you killed a man! You tried to frame Ray! I'm not proud of it, Lauren replies quietly. But you don't understand. I waited 15 years for a man who hated me. And all that time, he was planning how he would come back and get revenge. And you decided to get revenge on him, Foster states. Yes, an eye for an eye. He stole my life, I destroyed his. He condemned me to a slow death. I condemned him to prison for a murder he didn't commit. Sharon's phone rings. It's the mayor. Ray Clark is back. He's at the police station giving a statement. He says he didn't kill Mark. He's back, Lauren repeats. So it's all going to end soon. On August 23rd, the detective receives the results of the murder weapon analysis. Not only are Ray's fingerprints found on it, but also traces of another person, smudged but distinguishable. Analysis of the soil from Ray's clothes confirms his story. The soil composition matches that of a ravine 200 meters from the murder scene. The detective studies the Milford bus station's CCTV footage from August 12th and finds confirmation. A hooded female figure literally pulls the semi-conscious Ray out of the car, buys him a ticket, and sits him down in the waiting room. On August 24th, the detective arrives with an arrest warrant for Lauren, but no one is home. Sharon tearfully explains, "They left last night. Lauren and Dr. Foster. I didn't know." A search is launched for Lauren and Michael Foster. Their credit cards show a payment for a motel 120 miles from Pineview, but when the police arrive, no one is there. On August 25th, a package arrives at the police station. Inside is a flash drive and a note. The whole truth. Let the town know who Ray Clark was before prison. The flash drive contains recordings and photos documenting the domestic violence Lauren suffered before Ray's arrest. It explains a lot, says the detective, but it doesn't justify the murder. On August 26th, the police receive a message from Lauren. "I am guilty of Mark Donnelly's death. I acted in the heat of the moment, but I have no regrets. He and Ray ruined my life. Don't look for me. By the time you hear this, I will be dead." On the same day, Dr. Foster's car is found on a deserted beach 300 miles from Pineview. There are 2 sets of footprints in the sand leading to the water and nothing leading back. September 2024. Pineview slowly returns to normal life. The media attention gradually fades, and the news vans leave town. On the surface, everything looks the same. The main street with its cracked asphalt, the church with its bell tower, Sharon's cafe. But for the residents of Pineview, life will never be the same again. At the police station, Detective Alex Morgan gathers the last documents on the Clark case, preparing to transfer the materials to the district attorney's office. "This is the strangest case of my career," he admits. "You start with one victim and one perpetrator, and you end up with victims and perpetrators who are impossible to separate." The Coast Guard officially ends the search for Lauren Clark and Dr. Michael Foster on September 10th. The presumed death certificate is based on the discovery of the car, the suicide note, and the lack of activity on their documents and accounts. The bodies have not been found. In cases like this, the currents often carry the bodies out to sea, explains a Coast Guard officer, especially if there was extra cargo. Ray Clark is under house arrest awaiting trial. He's been charged with intentional exposure of HIV, but the murder charges against Mark Donnelly have been dropped. He lives in his old house, now empty and quiet. "He's changed a lot," says Jim Donovan, still the only person in contact with Ray. "He's gone completely gray in just a month. He hardly speaks. He's taking medication and going to therapy. It's like the life has been sucked out of him." In mid-September, the examination of the materials found in the package about domestic violence is completed. Photographs, audio recordings, and medical reports confirm that before his arrest, Ray did indeed subject Lauren to systematic physical and psychological abuse. "Domestic violence is a cycle," comments a psychologist who studied the case. "Flashes of aggression are followed by periods of remorse and reconciliation. Victims often stay with their abusers for years, hiding the truth from those around them. In Lauren's case, the situation was complicated by their public image as a perfect couple and the insularity of a small town. Sharon Woods, Lauren's best friend, is taking the news harder than anyone. Her cafe, once the center of Pineview's social life, is now half empty. Residents avoid talking about what happened. "I don't understand how I could have missed it," Sharon says tearfully. 15 years of friendship and I didn't see anything. No bruises before she went to prison, no signs of despair afterwards. What kind of friendship is that? On September 18th, there is an unexpected turn of events. A patient resembling Lauren is found in a small clinic on the Mexican border. She has different documents and a changed appearance, but the clinic administrator, who has seen the news about the events in Pineview, reports this to the police. By the time the American authorities arrive, the patient has disappeared. The only thing left is her HIV test results, which are negative. "Technically, this is impossible," explains a virologist. HIV infection does not disappear on its own. Either the initial diagnosis was wrong or these tests belong to someone else. Detective Morgan returns to Lauren's medical records from the Pineview and Milford clinics. Upon closer inspection, he discovers something strange. The HIV test results from the Milford clinic have slight differences in format from other tests done there. "Falsification?" asks Sheriff Perkins. "Possibly," Morgan replies. "But who and why? If Lauren wasn't HIV positive, then the whole story about Ray's revenge is a fabrication." On September 25th, an envelope with no return address appears in Sharon's mailbox. Inside is a short note and a locket that Sharon once gave Lauren for her birthday. The note reads, "I'm sorry for the lies. They were necessary. Don't look for me. I'm finally free. L." Sharon immediately hands the find over to the police. Forensic analysis confirms that the handwriting is Lauren's. Fresh fingerprints matching hers are found on the medallion. On October 1st, Detective Morgan requests an additional check of medical records from Lakeview Prison. This time, he asks for not only Ray's documents, but also Mark Donnelly's. The results come back a week later and reveal a shocking truth. Mark Donnelly was indeed HIV positive and had been on antiretroviral therapy since 2017, a year before Ray was believed to have been infected. But there is no mention of HIV status in Ray's medical records. There is only a record of a test conducted in December 2018 and the prescription of supportive therapy without specifying the diagnosis. All this time, we assumed that Ray was indeed HIV positive and deliberately infected his wife, says the detective. But what if that's not the case? What if he really didn't know his status? A re-interview with Ray sheds light on the situation. "I've never been HIV positive," he admits. "The test in prison was negative, but Mark convinced me that the doctors were hiding the results, that I was infected. He forged a copy of the report and showed it to me. I believed him. He manipulated me for years, playing on my paranoia, my hatred. Why would he do that? Revenge. I once testified against him in another case. It added 3 years to his sentence. But why did you take medication after your release? Why did you go to the Milford clinic?" "It wasn't antiretroviral drugs. I was being treated for depression. I didn't want anyone in Pineview to know, so I went to a neighboring town." "What about Lauren? Was she really HIV positive?" Ray smiles bitterly. "Now I realize she wasn't. She was manipulating me too. When I finally told her the truth, that I had believed for years that I was infected, that I wanted to get back at her but couldn't, she saw an opportunity. She said she had taken a test and it was positive. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I was with her without protection." The story unfolds into a grim picture of mutual manipulation, deception, and revenge. Mark Donnelly spent years convincing Ray that he was sick and that his wife had betrayed him. Ray returned to Lauren, torn between his desire for revenge and his resurgent feelings. Lauren, upon learning the truth, decided to use the situation to get revenge on her husband for years of abuse. "And Dr. Foster?" asks the detective. "What was his role?" "I don't know," Ray admits. "But he was always in love with Lauren, even before my arrest. She didn't notice, but I did." On October 10th, after a final review of all the evidence, Ray is charged with a new offense, not intentional infection, but intentional threat of infection. He did indeed experience a moment when he wanted to harm Lauren, although he was unable to do so. The sentence was much lighter: 2 years probation and psychiatric treatment. Lauren Clark and Michael Foster are still listed as missing, presumed dead. But Detective Morgan has not closed the case. Too many inconsistencies, he says. A negative HIV test from a Mexican clinic, fresh fingerprints on the medallion, and most importantly, Dr. Foster had access to medical records and could have faked the test results. What if they staged a suicide and ran away? At the end of October, a package arrives at the local newspaper office containing a DVD. It contains a video message from Lauren, recorded, judging by the date, the day before her suicide. "I'm telling this story so you know the truth," she says. 15 years ago, I sent a man to prison who made my life hell. Yes, I lied in court so I wouldn't go to prison myself. Yes, I was an accomplice to robbery. I'm no saint. But I'm not a victim who meekly accepts abuse year after year. She recounts the physical and psychological abuse she suffered in her marriage and how the robbery became her only way out of the cycle. When Ray came back, I thought prison had changed him. I wanted to believe that. But when I learned the truth, that he had been planning to hurt me for years, I realized nothing had changed. And I decided it was time to end this cycle of violence and revenge. She concludes by saying, "Don't look for me. The Lauren you knew is gone. And even if I'm physically alive, I'm dead to Pineview and everything it stands for." Sharon watches the video with the detective. She has tears in her eyes, but she also looks relieved. "I always knew she was stronger than she seemed," she says. "Whatever happened, I hope she found peace." In November, Sharon's cafe slowly returns to normal life. Ray Clark sells his house and leaves Pineview. Rumor has it he's moving to Arizona to start over. Detective Morgan occasionally scans international crime reports, looking for mentions of a couple resembling Lauren and Dr. Foster. Once, he thinks he sees her in a photo from an international medical conference, but the woman disappears before he can check. Pineview returns to its normal life. The church with its bell tower, the main street with its cracked asphalt, the new owner of the auto repair shop where Ray used to work. But at Sharon's cafe, people now avoid discussing the Clark story. She has become something that is not spoken of, but remembered by all. A reminder that behind the closed doors of a small town, the darkest secrets can be hidden, and that the line between victim and criminal is very thin.